Hi, this is Kip, and I'm interrupting the start of the show with a brief announcement for the attorneys in our audience. Once every quarter throughout the year, Jake and I offer a free online continuing legal education session. Our next CLE will be at noon Pacific time on Wednesday, March 30th. And this time, we're going to explore the impact of the Pandora Papers on the legal industry and the practical cybersecurity lessons for attorneys everywhere. So join us online for a 1-hour cutting-edge CLE on March 30th, 2022 at noon Pacific time, so Jake and I can share what we've learned by analyzing the Pandora Papers, a massive collection of over 11 million confidential leaked documents about offshore wealth that were stolen from law firms and then recently published. In addition to one CLE credit, you'll also receive actionable advice that you can use right away. So sign up now on eventbrite.com by using the link in this episode's show notes. We hope to see you there. And now let's listen to the next episode of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast.
Welcome to the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. Our mission is to help executives thrive as cyber risk managers. Your hosts are Kip Boyle, Virtual Chief Information Security Officer at Cyber Risk Opportunities, and Jake Bernstein, Partner at the law firm of K&L Gates. Visit them at cr-map.com and klgates.com.
So, Kip, what are we going to talk about today in episode 100?
Oh my God, have we really made it?
I think that we're going to celebrate because episode 100, I cannot believe that we've made it this far. And let's, recap and this is going to be a self-indulgent episode, but hopefully by now, if you've listened to us for this long, I think you'll be okay with our little self-indulgent episode.
It's not going to be all about us.
No, it won't. It's going to be substantively valuable still, because that's what we do here on the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. But honestly, who would have thought that 4 years ago when we talked about this, that we would be recording episode 100, having consistently released every other Wednesday. See, that to me is what makes it impressive. I mean, you can get to 100, right? But getting to 100 with a consistent release schedule is something to celebrate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the first things that we learned, right? And we'll kind of unpack that a little bit later. But what does it take to be successful as a podcaster? We'll share a couple of, certainly more than a couple of things that we've learned as we go through the episode today. But I thought it would be a great thing to sort of think back to, remember how it all started. What do you remember, Jake, about us? Just in the very beginning.
Well, what I remember is you said, "Hey, we should do a podcast," and then I remember having a relatively good wave of enthusiasm, along with a nonstop torrent of questions. And I didn't have any answers, so I think I said, "Sure, why not?" But I definitely remember thinking, and I think I probably said, I'm not quite sure. I think I do have some concerns about how much time that will take. Plus, what if we can't keep up with a publication schedule? We don't want to make our listeners mad at us. And then, we started. At some point later on, we also talked about foundation episodes, but I think we can talk about that for a little bit. So, let's quickly just let people know what we're going to talk about on this episode 100. We are going to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look at the history and how we started this podcast and what we learned. We're going to take you through the top 5 episodes by download count. And then Kip and I are going to do a round robin, which we have not shared with each other, of our personal top 3 favorite episodes. So there may be some overlap, there may not. We don't know. It's going to be interesting. But let's go ahead and Kip, why don't you tell us what you remember about those initial conversations back in the day?
I clearly remember saying something to you like, "Hey, we should do a podcast." And why did I even suggest that to you? Well, I liked listening to podcasts, and I thought it would be fun to have my own podcast, right? And to have somebody to help me figure out how to do it, because it's a challenge. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of technology. It's a very technical thing, sound and all that stuff. And what type of microphone do you need? How do you do the recordings? I mean, there's just there's a lot of tooling and technique and all that. And I thought, well, that'd be actually pretty fun. And I remembered that we both were like, I wonder if anyone's going to listen. And I was like, I don't know. We should probably think about who we're making this for. And we did think about it, right? We thought about who were we currently helping in our respective practices, your law practice, my consulting practice. And I remember thinking, well, why don't we just talk about the kinds of things that we talk about with our current clients, and who knows, maybe we'll maybe we'll get some new clients, or maybe at least people will just send us messages every now and then and kind of share with us what they think about those topics, because I think it's always good to hear how other people out there, other practitioners, right, what they're actually running into. And I think didn't that also happen? Didn't I say let's start a podcast about the same time that we got like a big joint client project going, and I think we were about to work together for the first time in a big way, right?
Yeah, I honestly can't. I'd have to go back and look at the email timeline to figure out exactly what came first, the podcast idea or the shared client. But
it was about the same time, I think.
I think it was about the same time. And I do, one thing that I remember thinking to myself, at least, and maybe we talked about it, was, even if nobody listens, we can do this for ourselves. And what does that mean? Well, putting together a podcast is kind of a form of forced CPE, or for a lawyer, CLE preparation. And, it turns out that one, I can actually use the podcast for my CISSP credit, which I do. Every year it counts for X number. I forget exactly how many it is. But even without any of that, credit system issue thing going on, it's been really valuable, because it has really, I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot from just preparing for and doing the podcast. I mean, there's things that I probably wouldn't have read or talked about, but for the podcast. And so, when we get down to the favorite episodes, you'll see one of my themes is which episodes did I learn a lot from? Because that ultimately, then you can't lose, right? When you're doing a podcast, if you're doing it for yourself, and then, hey, people listening, that's awesome. And then eventually that transitions where you're doing it for yourself, and then, it becomes, okay, well, people are listening. So now I'm motivated to do it for the audience. But it's both, I think, is where I look at it. And speaking of that, I don't remember. I feel like we did worry at one point about having enough topics, but I think it's kind of funny how that worked out. We really, every so often we have to do a little, episode brainstorming session where we just kind of get a bunch of topics down. But really, that has not been the problem at all.
No, no, it hasn't.
Which makes it,
which is great.
It is great. But the funny thing is that, do you remember that I think it took us 6 months to get the first episode out the door?
It did. So I was going back into my file archives and email archives, right? Because, we did some prep for episode 100, and we decided we wanted to do kind of a retrospective. So I went and did a little bit of digital archaeology, and our first script was finished on October 9th, 2017. That's when we finished it. I have no idea when we started writing it, but that's when we finished it. And then we started making our first recordings in November of 2017. But it wasn't until June of 2018 that we actually dropped our first episode through iTunes, or the iTunes store where they were doing podcasts. The people could subscribe to. And this is back, before podcasts. I mean, podcasts were becoming a thing, but they hadn't become Joe Rogan popular, right? And Correct. So this was early days, and just publishing a podcast, I remember it took us like 4 weeks to figure out how exactly do you submit a podcast to iTunes. It was like an undocumented, not easy thing.
No, it's
so that was
easier
part
now.
of it. Yeah. Oh
Well,
my gosh, it's way easier now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, wasn't that might have even been pre like the Apple Podcast app? I think it was.
Well, I can't remember for sure, but I just remember it was non-trivial. It was non-trivial. I had many conversations with so-called experts, and it was non-trivial. But we did it. But why did it take us 6 months? Well, it wasn't just because we, couldn't figure out how to submit it to Apple Podcasts. But, there was a lot of
Well,
I remember there was a
way
lot
off. 2012, real-time follow-up, as they say. 2012 is when the podcast app was released. So, but it was definitely not a big deal, or as big a deal back then, or even in 2017.
Right. But I remember what we struggled with, why it took us 6 months to release, was there was a lot of technological things. I mean, we had to buy, like a cardioid microphone in the beginning, right? Like, I didn't even know what a cardioid microphone was, but, found out we needed one of those. And had to figure out, well, how are we going to record this stuff? Are we going to use Zoom or Zencaster? I can't even remember all the different platforms that we tried. We also had to figure out how to organize ourselves. Like, we knew we wanted to be like more or less in the 30-minute range, but how do we do that? Because you and I are prone to just going off on wild tangents. So it's like, okay, how do we talk about something in a coherent way without going crazy and driving the audience nuts because we can't stay on topic? And where do we upload the audio files? Because it turns out Apple does not host your audio files. You got to find some other place to do that. You need cover art. And then we also realized that we wanted to build up a reserve of episodes because, we didn't want to have some kind of a client crisis or, something to come along and having a scramble at the last minute to make an episode to publish tomorrow morning. I mean, I don't like that. And
no, I wouldn't want to do that. That would be
awful.
It's just not that's not. If you're in the podcast business and that's your job, then yeah, that might be of necessity. But that was not how we wanted to do things. At all.
We wanted to have evergreen topics, right? That people could go back and listen to months or maybe even years after we published them, and they'd still be useful, right? So we chose not to do a news of the day type podcast, which would become, like day old bread very quickly. So, and then post-production too, right? We had to figure that out.
We did. And I have some podcaster guilt from some of the early episodes where I recorded using the MacBook Pro microphone at one point, which I feel so bad about. I recorded using AirPods, which wasn't, that's not quite as bad. But we've gone on both of us have gone through several different mics and different techniques over time. And there's a lot of blogs and information out there about that. So we're not going to belabor the details there. But I think, one of the things that we, that we should talk about is the importance of how to publish consistently, which really was the idea of, having episodes, quote, in the can. I don't know if that's the standard phrase, or I feel like it might be, but that's what we've always said. It's, how many episodes did we have in the can? There is no can. I'm not really sure why we say that, but we say it.
It's a digital can.
It's a digital can. And, at one point I think our high point of episodes in the can was 6. So we did get ahead of ourselves. And actually, it turns out that's too far in advance, because what happens is you record an episode, you get excited about it, and then you realize at one point that, this thing's not going to publish for like 3 months. And that's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when we got down to 1 or 2, because I was moving homes and joining a new firm, that was a little scary, because then it was like, oh man, we might actually risk needing to do one of those like record and publish within a day type of thing. So
yeah. And our post recording pipeline is not that complicated, but we do have an audio engineer. Hey, Andrew, just shout out for Andrew, who makes sure.
Thanks you very much, Andrew. It's great work.
Who makes us sound good. And he doesn't have to do much, right? I know he does a few things to kind of remove some of the obvious rough edges off of, when our levels aren't right or whatever. Andrew, I have no idea how you do your job. I have not a clue. But we told Andrew,
he engineers the audio, Kip. Come on, it's obvious, right? He just engineers the audio. He's an audio engineer.
He's got one big green button. He presses it, goes and gets some coffee,
awesome.
He comes back.
I could probably do that if it was just one big green button.
But we told him, don't go crazy. Don't remove every don't try to kill every, pregnant pause. Live radio, please, is kind of what we wanted to do. And I think in 4 years, in 100 episodes, what has there been? Something like, I can remember one episode where we were in the middle of it. We had a guest, and the guest's internet dropped out, and
that was recent.
Yeah, it was. It was very recent, and we had to do editing because we couldn't restart the episode. We were already 2/3 of the way through or something like that. We didn't want to restart the episode, but that was probably the only time where we were recording this fabulous episode and it just completely went off the rails.
Yeah, and one thing that I do want to quickly mention is kind of a housekeeping thing is, and I also want to apologize to the audience. Historically, even though our episodes, the file names had an episode number in them, we haven't really exposed those. Like, you can't search by episode number. We can't really even reference episode number. Starting with this episode 100, we're going to be including an episode number in the title for all of them. We may, no promises, even go back and add in episode numbers. It's just too difficult to reference things. And you know what? One of our goals was to make these evergreen episodes, it's actually kind of difficult to reference an evergreen episode if you have to be like, that one that was about this sometime in 2018 is just not exactly an efficient way of doing it. And even though we could find an exact date, it's just way easier to reference by episode number. So, dear audience, we will be doing that going forward, and maybe if we can, retroactively.
Well, and we probably will do it retroactively. And let me tell you why, because there's one other thing that we're doing. I already actually kicked the ball, so to speak, on this. We're going to build a podcast website. We're going to build a website dedicated to this podcast, because right now it's hosted on the cyberriskopportunities.com website. If you go there and you hit /podcast, you can see the episodes there, but it's bare bones, and we really need to do better. And so I just got a web expert to start the process of building us our very own podcast website. And part of the design will include episode numbers so that it's fast and easy for people to find the episodes that they want. So, we're going to transcript everything too, by the way.
Ooh, that'll be nice. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna put myself in a box and say this now in hopes of making it come true. We have a vision. We want this to be a community that people can interact with. And even though Kip and I have our own, super secret Slack channel that we will sometimes use, I'm hoping to be able to create like a discourse powered, non-public forum, but obviously it's accessible. But without an account, you won't be able to read things. But I don't know, Kip. I think our audience, pretty much by definition, would like to be able to potentially interact with each other, not to mention with us. So I think that we should add that to the list of things that we want to do. And I think 2022. I will promise, even if I have to figure out how to stand up a discourse server myself, that it will happen in 2022. It may not happen until December 2022, but it will happen in 2022.
Okay. Well, here's an invitation. If you're listening to this episode and you'd like to get onto some kind of a Discord server with us or Slack channel, I don't know, anything like that, just where you can chat with other people who listen to the show. Me and Jake.
I was thinking discourse, like an old school, more of like an online old school forum, but Discord server might actually be an even better idea. If you've got, let's say this, if you've got ideas, or if you'd be interested in volunteering to moderate either a discourse or a Discord forum and or server, let us know. It should be fairly easy to contact us. So yeah, please do.
Yeah, that would be great. Let us know if you have any appetite for this, and then we'll get busy on it. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we want to share about kind of how we got to this point. One more thing. Let's talk about guests. So, it took us a long time to actually get to the point where we felt confident enough to have a guest. And I think it was about a year from the time we started publishing. So that means 18 months from the time that, we first started, we first made the commitment to do the podcast. And so I want to call out our first guest. It was Melissa Van Buehler, and her episode was published June 11th, 2019, and that was actually episode 29. So, and Melissa was an excellent guest. We already knew Melissa, so it was
safe.
It was safe. That's right. Melissa was a very safe guest. We've had other guests that we didn't know all that well, but they had maybe published a report or something, and we felt like our audience should know about that. And they've been amazing too. Like, we have not had even one guest that was dodgy or difficult to work with. So,
and special shout out to Melissa. Really helped us get a process together for realizing, oh, you mean we can't just schedule someone on a calendar and then magically have them record a podcast with us?
That's right.
That turns out not to work very well. So now we have a fairly complicated process for that. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of our stats. I know you have a stat you want to talk about, and then let's get into some of the episodes.
Yeah. So before I release the statistic here, I want to say that we don't live and die by our numbers. Like, we have statistics. We do track that stuff, but we don't obsessively look at it. And it's never really been a part of who we are to judge ourselves based on how many listeners we have or so forth, right? So, I mean, like, that has never really been a big topic of conversation. What we've really done is just focused on making sure that the audio quality is great, that the audio quality is great, and that the audio quality is great. And content, right?
And that we have good content, yes.
And then we have good content. So you put those two things together, and it turns out that's a lot of what makes a podcast successful, plus consistent delivery, right? So those are sort of the key ingredients. Well, I'm happy to share with you that something's working, okay? Because I went over to Listen Notes, which is a free website that you can subscribe to it and get crazy and really dig in. But if you go to listennotes.com and you just put in your favorite podcast, whatever it is, they'll tell you where they put that podcast in their overall tracking. They're tracking something like 2.7 million podcasts that are out there. And I'm happy to say that our little show is in the top 5% of all 2.7 million podcasts that they track, which is stunning.
That is amazing. As you know, probably in fairness, we actually don't know the facts here, but I would say that, we could at least guess that of those 2.7 million podcasts that are tracked, we really have no idea how many survived even 5 episodes, let alone 100. Nonetheless, even if the top 5% is only like the serious podcasts, we're still competing with something like 135,000 other podcasts. So that our audience could be listening to. And I'd like to think that among our audience, we are people enjoy listening to us. So what else did you see in the stats? Like, how about total downloads?
It's a big number. It's the total downloads is not the same as total listeners. All right. So I'll tell you that, but it does tell you like how many people either subscribed. And so an episode is automatically downloading when it releases, or they're physically like pulling up a web browser or something, and they're clicking a button and they're saying, "I want to download this next episode." It's okay. So the end of 2021, it was 105,909 downloads, which is that's a crazy big number.
That is a big number. I mean, that's a lot of people downloading something that obviously, as much as I enjoy it, we both know this is a niche podcast. So
Definitely, we're not Joe Rogan.
No, we're not Joe Rogan. So that's for sure. That's really great. So okay, what were the top 5 episodes by download count? I think this is interesting.
Okay, yeah. So this is sort of like top 5, and we'll do it not backwards. We'll just do it by like what was the number one most downloaded episode, and we'll go from there. I do also want to say before we do the top 5 that we actually compare really well to very well-known podcasts when you measure us a little differently, besides like total downloads and top 5% on listen notes. So for example, if you look at the average number of episodes consumed by an average listener, like we beat out NPR podcasts, and we compare very well with a lot of other podcasts that have enormous audiences. And that's a really important statistic because it tells you a lot about audience engagement. So in other words, we don't have an audience as big as Joe Rogan or as any of the NPR podcasts, but we do have a high level of engagement, which I think is great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But okay, number one most downloaded episode, and that was number 39. And it was called the Major Cyber Risk of Private Equity Firms. And what we did there is we talked about an investment that a couple of private equity firms made in a company called Colorado Timberline, which ultimately was hacked to death by cyber criminals. And it's well documented on the internet. If you want to just search Colorado Timberline ransomware in your favorite search engine, you'll be able to access it. Of course, you should listen to our episode from November 12th, 2019, because we kind of summarized it all for you. But 2,619 downloads so far. That's number one.
Number 2 was episode 44 that aired on January 7th, 2020, which, unless I mistake, no, it's exactly 2 years ago from recording of this episode.
Yeah.
That would be cybersecurity for entrepreneurs and their employees.
Yeah. Yeah. With just over 2,000 downloads. And by the way, it's interesting. So in an episode that came out 2 years ago or 3 years ago is still getting downloaded and listened to, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it says something about our goal of being, yeah, right. Our goal was to, provide evergreen content, not only as a service to listeners, but also because if I'm talking to a prospective customer or if I'm working on something new with an existing customer and there is a podcast episode available, I like to share that with them so that they can listen to, what we have already had to say on their own time, and they don't have to pay me to summarize it for them, right? Because, a lot of times, we end up charging by the hour. I think you often charge by the hour. I do a lot. And to have me regurgitate a podcast episode on the clock is not the best use of anyone's time. So anyway, so it's working out for everybody, I hope. The third most downloaded, downloaded episodes is number 41, and that one's called Security Outsourcing, Vendor Selection, and Management at just over 1,800 downloads by the at the time that I pulled these stats. That episode was published November 26th, 2019. So, and the reason why we did that episode, the big reason why we did that is because I had just finished recording my not an episode, but an entire online video course for LinkedIn Learning on that topic. And I wanted to share what I had put together with the audience. So it's not all, like the entire course is not all in there, but there's a lot of goodness.
For sure. And then, so what I would say, we're on the top, this is the number 4.
Yep.
This would be episode 48 on March 3rd, 2020, with 1,574 downloads. The effects of cyber attacks on corporate reputation and consumer confidence. Yeah, that was an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, because, corporate reputation is a lot of our customers don't even realize it. I think intuitively they realize it, but it's not necessarily something that's front of mind that they're actively thinking about. But your reputation is an enormous asset. It's a digital asset. It's ethereal, right? It doesn't appear on the balance sheet. You might have something called goodwill, in your corporate financial statements. But what I find is that when we do cyber risk work, I have to remind people a lot, hey, don't forget your reputation is a massively high value asset. And in fact, depending on what business you're in, if you lose your reputation, you will lose your business, right? So we wanted to talk about the effect of cyber attacks on what I think is any organization's most important asset.
Absolutely. And then let's see, the last one here. You want to tell us what was number 5, Kip?
Yep. The 5th one was episode number 46, Experiences with Law Enforcement on Cybercrime Cases, 1,500 downloads, just a little bit more than that. And we released that on February 4th, 2020. And if anybody's been like kind of tallying the downloads here, I think there's something noteworthy, right, Jake?
Well, yeah, and actually it gets more interesting as we go. The difference between the 5th one, which we just told you is 1,511, and the 6th ranked was only 7 downloads. Mm-hmm. And on average, particularly once you get past the top, by the time you get to the top 4, the top 3 are the kind of the outliers a little bit, where they have several hundred different, as difference. But on average, there are only 12 downloads difference between each episode, which means that, again, it's consistent with that other statistic. That the idea is that you guys, if you're a listener, you stick with us and you listen to most of our episodes. So thank you. It's we really appreciate that, and we're going to try to do. We'd like to, since you're here and you enjoy listening to us. That's really one of the reasons why we want to get the website up. Find some way to interact a bit more, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. When I looked at the bar chart of all of the downloads, I looked at it and I went, okay, that's the long tail everybody's been talking about. Yeah,
for sure.
Oh man. So anyway, we're really grateful. Just take a moment, right? And thank you. Those of you who are in our audience, whether you've been with us from the beginning or if you've just recently joined us, we can see in the statistics, right, that you're supporting us, and we really appreciate that. Okay, so that's kind of what you guys are saying you're interested in. Let's turn the tables a little bit and have a little bit of fun. So Jake and I are going to compare our hand-chosen top 3 episodes based only on personal preference. So I thought, which one did I like? And I also thought things of like, what kind of an impact might it have had on the listeners? Did I like the topic itself? How evergreen, is it really? Those are some of the things that I thought of. What did you think about when you were picking your top 3, Jake?
I went and I tried to figure out like which ones were most memorable for whatever reason. But I ultimately ended up going with ones that I learned a lot with, that I thought were really interesting for the audience, and that I just had fun recording.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to round robin. So I'll give my top. Jake will give his top. We'll just go back and forth. We have no idea which ones, I don't know which ones Jake chose. He doesn't know which ones I chose. So any reactions that are on that you get from us is live.
It will be. And one thing we both want to start with, we decided that we did want to have a special mention. We chose we agreed not to choose any of our Verizon DBIR deconstruction episodes, because many of them are 2-parters. And then it gets, is that 1 or 2 episodes? How does that work? But that is by far our mutually favorite top recurring episode. And so, you should think that, at least for the hosts, those DBIR episodes are amongst our favorites.
And why is that? Well, it's because we love the DBIR. So
we love the DBIR.
And we've had some people who are intimately involved in the creation of the DBIR as guests on our show. We'll probably ask them to come back in the future. If you're listening to us and you've helped make the DBIR possible, thank you. We use it in our work.
Yep, we do. All right, Kip. Let's do this round robin. So you reveal your top one, and I'll reveal my top one, and then we'll do number 2 and then number 3.
Okay. And when I tell you what my top one is, I'll also tell you why.
Yes.
So this is my number 1 favorite episode, It's episode number 31. It was published July 9th, 2019, and it's called Protecting Your Accounts Payable Function from Cyber Attack. And we had a guest, Deborah Richardson, and what she told us was how finance professionals should protect their company from common financial cyber fraud like business email compromise. Now, the reason why I chose this is because in my work, okay, so first of all, you have to know, if you don't know this, people in the audience, our audience members, I work mostly with CFOs and VPs of IT in small, medium-sized businesses. So companies with, say, between 50 employees and 500 employees. And they have to get super practical, and they have to have ruthless prioritization because they have limited resources to deal with all of the cyber risk that's coming at them. And what I loved about Deborah when she was our guest is she shared many practical low-cost mitigations that will save thousands or millions of dollars for companies that implement them. And I think she did a fantastic job of proving the point that you don't have to spend a ton of money on blinky light, boxes in order to get real cyber risk reduction. And Deborah's not even a cybersecurity professional. She's a finance professional who knows a lot about cybersecurity, and she blew me away. That's my favorite episode.
That was a good one. Okay, so I'm going to start off by cheating,
as you do,
as I might do. Yeah. So my top episode is actually it is a two-parter. There's really no way to split them up. We really had no choice when we recorded it.
We'll call it a mega episode.
They were recent. It was unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons we're going to be including episode titles. I don't have the episode numbers. What I have are the dates. So it was September 14th and October 1st, 2021. It was how to really make sure that cybersecurity is everyone's job, parts 1 and 2. And I think this was probably to date my favorite substantive episode to both prepare for and record, because this was about creating a cyber secure culture, and we based it off some behavioral science papers and then a Verizon white paper. That was the second part, was talking about the white paper. The first part was the behavioral science paper. And I just found that so fascinating, learning about how a sociologist and these types of scientists look at the culture of an organization. And Kip, this works really well, because Kip just talked about how, we have all these low cost remediations, and, you don't have to spend a ton of money to do that, like on blinky lights. And here's another set of episodes that really is probably one of the most effective forms of defense against cyber attack, is creating a cyber secure culture. And, it can cost money. Like it will, and it will be, it's going to be
not going to cost as much as an enterprise blinky light tool. I'll tell you that.
But it's not going to cost as much as an enterprise blinky light tool. And it will probably be better in the long run than any blinky light box that is not magical.
Exactly. So, by the way, I've got the editorial calendar here, Jake, and I'll tell you in the audience that those were episodes 88 and 89. So in the future, when we actually go and renumber all these, everybody will be able to reference it in that way. Okay, so let's keep going here. My number 2 top episode of all time was episode 50. That was our listener survey. We actually released a survey, and at the end of 2019, I think it was, and then we analyzed it, and then on March 31st, 2020, we shared what we learned from our listeners. And it was a big deal for me, because it was the first time that I felt like we really heard from you, who you were, what you were interested in. And I was tickled because it took 50 episodes to get to the point where we could actually have a good interaction with folks. So, yep, that was my second most favorite one.
That's good. So, I have to confess, Kip, that I had a list of 5. And I'm picking them. I'm making the final decision in real time which I think is the best way. So for me, my second favorite episode here was February 16th, 2021. So now you can start to look up the episode number. Negotiating the Data Security Addendum. I mean, look, it's so much of what I do that recording it was, in some ways it was an easy episode to prepare for. But the reason I like it is that there's so much value that can be gleaned from that episode. In it we really talk about, what should you be thinking about? Whether you're the seller, in other words, a provider of cybersecurity services, or any service, really, any type of data service, or the buyer. There's something in there for all sides, and I just think it's a great resource episode for listeners. And so that is my that's my number 2. And Kip, tell us, what episode was that?
I've got it right here, looking at the editorial calendar. You were right. That was published on February 16th, 2021, and it was episode number 73. And, this is really interesting. I'm detecting a theme here. We're not actually choosing the episodes that are very technically intensive, are we?
Well, we haven't yet.
No. Okay. I just gleaned an insight into one of Jake's
it depends what you think
episodes.
is technical. I mean, from my perspective as a lawyer, negotiating the data security addendum is a highly technical episode. So it really depends.
Okay, right. You're right. But of course, I was thinking technical as in configuring your firewall, but all right, that's cool. So my third favorite episode, and by the way, I'll tell you, I had 9 finalists. I went through all 100 and I whittled it down to 9. And then I had to make hard choices about, which 6 were not going to get mentioned. So here's my number 3 most favorite episode. It was number 87. We just published it in August 31st of 2021, and it's called Cybersecurity for Small Companies. And that episode is meaningful to me personally because in preparing for it, I had a lot of epiphanies. I have been working with SMBs for years, and when I was a full-time CISO, I was working at a medium-sized insurance company. So I've worked in large enterprises, and I still help large enterprises. But SMBs are interesting. There's a lot more nuance. You have to deal with a lot of other political realities, resource realities, and I've been struggling to come up with a basic approach that I could use that would be efficient and would really generate a lot of value. And I finally figured it out. And then preparing for this episode required me to sort of like pull it all together and really sweat it out so that I could actually talk about, what we'd figured out. And so during that episode, we talked about this thing that we've invented called a CR map. It's a cyber risk management action plan. And I built a whole website about it. And so it's out there, crmap.com, cr-map.com. And as somebody who's trying to serve small, medium-sized businesses, this episode really put the cherry on top of this idea that there are practical, low-cost mitigations that will save these organizations thousands or millions of dollars to prevent bad things from happening or to contain bad things fast, which we know from reading the DBIR, if you can stop bad things from happening or contain them quickly, you're going to save a ton of money. So anyway, that's my number 3. What about you?
Okay, so my number 3, and I had I may quickly mention my 2 honorable mentions at the end just for fun and to further cheat because that's what I like doing here. But I do have a third pick that is a clear winner for me, and that would be there must have been something about February 2021, February 2nd, 2021, the failure of the cybersecurity market. I loved this episode because what we did is we discussed a study put out by a company or an organization called debatesecurity.com, and it was titled The Cybersecurity Technology Efficacy Fiasco. And it was, is cybersecurity the new, quote, market for lemons? And this, I have this whole marked up PDF that I must have read on an iPad because I've got a bunch of handwritten digital notes in it. I love looking back at some of this stuff. But this to me, in fact, I'm probably going to go back and relook at this because it was something that's been bothering me for quite a while at the time that we recorded this. Was just this feeling that there's so many of these companies that offer some blinky light or SaaS product that's going to save everybody. And here's the problem: is back when we went to physical, industry events like Secure World.
Yeah.
I used to make a game, and I'm sure I will someday again, of going through and seeing, which companies are still around. And there's definitely some that are safe and secure. But man, I'll tell you, there are a lot of companies that only make it 1 or 2 years in a row and then they're gone. And why is that? I wonder, what is the deal with this? What is going on? And I think this article, this study, and then the episode really goes into useful detail about that. And this isn't just about, this isn't really meant, it was never meant to be an episode about making fun of, failed cybersecurity companies. That's not it at all. What it's really about is understanding the difficulty of cybersecurity. It's not necessarily amenable to a quick and easy fix.
Right.
And when you are marketed a tool and it sounds anything like a quick and easy fix, that's when we start to, that is when Kip and I will start to make fun of, magic blinky light boxes. Like, it just doesn't pan out, and you can spend a lot of money for nothing. And so I think this is it's a really important episode. I believe there's even a law review article about, snake oil cybersecurity products. And so that's my third pick. And Kip,
Okay.
which episode was that? I'm guessing it was 72.
It was 72. Now that you know that your previous pick was 73. So that's really interesting. So back-to-back episodes made it into your top list.
And that was just random because I was, when I was looking at them, I was not paying attention to the publication date or the episode number.
Well, it makes it easy on our listeners. They can listen to 72 and just roll right into 73.
Yeah, totally.
Do you have any honorables, huh?
Yeah. Do you have any honorable? So I don't remember. I have January 8th and no year, but I just loved the title of Contractual Firewalls. Thought that was a great episode title. And that's really all I wanted to say about that. And then the other one was December 8th, 2020, the role of general counsel in cyber risk management. I think that one's just useful for obvious reasons.
That one's episode 68. For anybody who's keeping score out there, that was December 8th, 2020. And then the other one was Contractual Firewalls. Yeah.
So I think that was early.
Managed to squeak the word firewall into an episode title. That was a very early episode. That was number 14.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's the earliest episode from either of our lists. So there you go.
So that would have been January 8th, 2019 then.
Let's see, 2019. That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So one of my runners up, I'll tell you, was episode 6. And that came out on September 4th, 2018. And that was called Cyber Risk Management and Attorney-Client Privilege. We threw you a bone.
Yeah, that was a good one. And you know what? What's funny about that is that issue is not decided. It's still complicated.
Oh, yeah. I know. We just saw this huge article the other day I forwarded to you that I'd seen. And yeah, there's still so much going on around, privileged work product and how companies need to contract with outside firms. And yeah, it's like a little bubbling soup.
It's interesting though how of our legitimate top 3, you had one from the last 3 years, and mine were all within the last year.
Okay, I'll tell you why that happened. Because I was okay, look, these episodes are all my favorite, right? They're my babies. I love them. I love every one of them.
Yeah, me too.
So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this, right? How am I going to zero in on top 3? So I went, all right, I'm going to take 2018, 2019. I'm going to go by year, okay? So I just went to each year and I picked them out. And then after I got to my my final 9, I was like, all right, I'm going to just pick one from each year. And that's kind of how I got there. But I'm happy with my top 3. I really am happy with what I've come up with. So
no, they're good. And I think one of the things that I we have good episodes. I think we have over time gotten better at this podcast.
Yeah.
I that's probably natural. But I will tell you this, this is making me really excited for the next 100 episodes. I look forward to doing that, and hopefully all of you are with us.
There's just I still have plenty of gas in my tank for doing this. Like I do not feel burnt out in the least.
No, not at all.
I agree with you. More excited, and I think if there's anybody in the audience who's thinking about starting a podcast, or if you've got one and maybe you're struggling with it, I think one of the reasons why I don't feel burnt out is because we only release every other week. So I don't feel the pressure of a new episode all the time. I think the fact that we have, 3 episodes in the can gives me like the mental freedom to really choose topics that I like when it's my turn to prepare an episode. And so, I think those are important reasons why I'm not feeling burnt out. And yeah.
Agreed.
Take that for what it's worth. All right, everybody. That's it. We love our listeners. Thank you so much. And that wraps up this episode, number 100 of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. We celebrated today. We were a little self-indulgent, but I hope it was helpful for you to think about how we got to this point and the fact that there's still a lot of good material in our back catalog. So if you haven't listened to it, go take a look. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. If you need to overcome a cybersecurity hurdle that's keeping you from growing your business profitably, then please visit us at cr-map.com.